If you all know what that means, sacrilegious means that I'm going sort of off the deep end with theology or the Bible. But no, I don't think so. And just follow me with this as we go through this process. The Jewish people, they had many different festivals that they would go to Jerusalem to celebrate. The largest festival was Passover. All Jewish men within like a 15, 20-mile radius were required to come for Passover. But during Passover, Jews from around the world would make the journey for Passover at Jerusalem. But when they would get there, they would have to do a couple of things. One, they would have to pay their temple tax. About a month before Passover started, there were vendors in the different towns around Jerusalem that would do the exchanging of the Roman money into the temple shekel. And the temple tax was a half a shekel per adult male. So if you came from another part of the world, from Italy, from Egypt, or even if you went from northern Israel down to Jerusalem, you would have to have that half a shekel to pay for your temple tax. If you didn't have shekels, you would go to the exchange tables in some of the outlying cities. But a week before Passover, they brought all of those outlying city places or exchange places into the temple. And what they were doing was the exchange rate of a half a shekel, which was 2 days' labor for the common person, was 1 day labor. Pretty high exchange rate, if you ask me. I mean, so it's like, if it was $10, they would charge you $5 for the exchange rate. Pretty high. Also, what they were doing was they were selling the doves and the sheep for slaughter. And the doves, the markup on the doves was 4 pence, it's called 4 pence, whatever 4 pence is worth, 4 pence up to 75 pence. I mean, that is almost a 2,000% markup. 2,000% markup. But the people had to go there to worship. They wanted to go there to worship God. And I could imagine it'd be a little hard to bring your dove, 100 miles away, to sacrifice, or to bring your lamb all that distance to sacrifice. So you'd bring some money along and you would buy an item there and sacrifice it. And what's interesting too, when you look at it and understand, within the temple compound, the bazaar was headed up by Ananias, the high priest. He was on the take. He was making a kickback from all of these exorbitant high exchange rates and the exorbitant amounts of having to buy the lambs or the doves. So with this, Jesus walks into Jerusalem. He walks into the temple, and he enters the temple area. He begins to drive out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the table, the money changers, the benches of those selling doves. He would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. If you really want to get into this story is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. If you got a study Bible, it will say that. Refer you to the other passages. The Gospel of John has Jesus cleaning the temple on Jesus' first Passover, 3 years earlier. John talks about Jesus taking a whip and driving out the animals, not driving out the people, as the video showed. But that doesn't make a good movie, does it? If you're just driving out the animals. Of course, the movie makers want to make it look like he's also beating up on the people. It never says that he beat up on the people. He drove out the animals. He overturned the tables. And what's interesting to me is, I have heard people, and even this past week, talking to somebody, they said to me, well, Pastor, when I get angry at my kids, I think about this passage, and I know that since Jesus got angry, it's okay that I get angry. And I'm thinking, you're missing the picture of the story of what's going on. we can't excuse our anger because Jesus got angry in the temple 2 different times. You see, the anger that he had was something totally different than too often the anger that we may have. What do I mean with that? We'll go on here. Jesus said, and it has been taught, is it not written, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this, and they began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. The whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. There's the aspect within our lives that we need to realize for Jesus here. He was not angry for himself. He was angry for God's house. Book of John talks about the fact that after it took place, the disciples remembered from the passage of the Old Testament from one of the Psalms where it says, the zeal of the Lord will consume him. The zeal, the excitement, the desire of God will consume him. So what was Jesus upset about? Number one, I believe, it was the commercialization of religion. The commercialization of religion. He says, how dare you turn my Father's house into a marketplace? How dare you make an exorbitant amount of money off of faith? Now, when the Sons of Thunder were here just a month ago, and they were selling t-shirts, they were selling them for a little bit of profit, but not an exorbitant amount of profit. If they were trying to sell their stuff for 30, 40, 50 bucks, I would have said, well, wait a minute, no. You paid like 8 bucks for them and you're selling them for 10 or 12. You're making some money on it because it's their living. Jesus here is talking about the commercialization of religion. There's one TV evangelist that some of you may love this individual because they're on a lot, but I know that they make over $250,000. Now, you may say, oh, that's not that much money. Some of you may say, whoa, that's a lot of money. I think as a pastor, that's almost using your church to make yourself $250,000. Plus they got their own jet. You go, whoa. Some of you, whether you like him or not, Robert Schuller, Crystal Cathedral, Hour of Power. Ever watch that show sometimes? I've been out there before a couple of times, and the one time I had a chance 25 years ago to talk to Robert Schuller, myself, and some other people. And the thing that I found interesting was, at that point in time, he didn't take a salary from the church. He took a housing allowance, but not a salary. Because he wrote, and his books are what he lived on. At that point I thought, here's a man that he's trying to live out what Jesus is talking about here, I hope. Jesus is against the commercialization of religion. He's against the exploitation of the faithful. He says, my house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. Exploitation of the people. He also says that his house is called to be a place of worship and prayer. My house is to be a place of prayer for all people. But you're making it difficult to worship. Impossible to worship. And then I wonder sometimes, how do we make it difficult for people to worship here? Or do we make it easy? My prayer is that we are open and that we say, come and worship with us. I find it interesting that having the middle school kids up this morning, GP and Kathy, 13 years ago, 1999, when I showed up here to be pastor, some of you were here at that point in time. Remember the high schoolers? Once a month, we would do praise music. Once a month, that was it. No more. And the high schoolers would lead the praise music. How things have changed. How they've changed. Prayerfully for all of us to say we can come in here and we can worship, and prayer and worship is easily accessible for all of us to God. This is an interesting thing, a picture of the temple. So what was going on is the temple had what was called the court of the Gentiles. And Gentiles and Jewish men and women could all be in this court area. This is the area that Jesus is cleaning out. Right here is called the Court of Women. Jewish